But I got to tell you, my business coach used to tell me this. He says, Chris, there's two types of people: those that run towards change and those that run away from change. So that moment, kind of summoning up my courage to say, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go outside of my comfort zone. I'm going to step out in front of the camera. I'm going to do this thing. It literally changed the course of my life.
Hey man, how's it going?
Yes, Sean. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. How you doing?
Doing good, brother. Another good week in the Bucks, man. We're killing it. I'm enjoying this warm weather, and the fact is, summer. It's hard to be inside sometimes with the sun outside and the opportunity to be out in nature and enjoy the warm weather. You know.
No, I can appreciate it. I try to, depending on the meeting, I try to sit in the backyard. There's a period during the day where I got just enough shade, so my background actually looks like a Zoom background. So, but when the leaves start moving and stuff like that, people say, "Where are you?" But it's depending. So, like you, it's hard to stay inside. But listen, Sean, I'm seeing your shirt, man. I didn't know you were a Spider-Man guru. I'm a Spider-Man man. I like Spider-Man. I like X-Men, but is that work attire? Let me see this.
It was my son. We coordinated today. My son is a huge Spider-Man fan, and he has Spider-Man jammies, Spider-Man clothes, 2 Spider-Man bikes, and so he woke up this morning, Daddy, let's wear a Spider-Man shirt. So I'm like, all right, let's do it.
Okay. Well, you should bring him on the call next time, man.
Definitely. All right. So, and let's segue here. So, hello, everybody. Thank you again for joining us for a brand new episode of As Is To Be, where we go and unpack transformation, whether that be our careers, relationships, or even ourselves. That's what As Is To Be is all about. I am your co-host, Sean Achampong, a digital transformation specialist.
I'm also your co-host, Carl Reed, go by Creed, digital transformation specialist as well.
Right on. And today we have an amazing guest that I'm super excited to introduce you to. His name is Chris Doe. So thank you, Chris, for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Right on. Let me take a minute to tell you all about Chris, an amazing career. So let's unpack that a bit. Chris is a founder of 2 7-figure businesses, the first of which is Blind, an Emmy award-winning motion design studio where he ran for over 2 decades. Then in 2014, at the ripe age of 42 years old, he reluctantly made his first YouTube video, which altered the trajectory of his life and his career. A few years later, the Futur was born, a beloved education company with millions of fans from all around the world. Now, he's dedicated his life and his mission to teaching over 1 billion people and how to make a living doing what they love. Wow. Thank you again, Chris. This is exciting. Thank you.
I'm excited to do this.
All
Chris,
right.
I'm just as excited, probably even more so. I'm a fanboy, so I'm trying to just calm my nerves as I interact with you. My wife introduced your show to me, and then ever since then, I think it was maybe 48 hours later, because that's when I came up for air, listening to all this segment of, I went back and it just listen. And then I finally got back to work, but just so impressed with your background. I rarely get to hear your transition, like how you were able to create your career. I heard little snippets of it, how you created your career, how did you get to your point where you are right now and where you want to go. But let's start with first your trajectory, like your background, and how did you get to this marketing career that you're so known for?
Sure. I studied graphic design, traditionally trained at a really great, prestigious design school called Art Center in Pasadena. And once I got out of school, I immersed myself in industry and entrepreneurship, started my very young design company, didn't know anything about business at all, and really struggled the first couple of years. And I went through what I imagine a lot of people who start off without a lot of experience, launching themselves into an independent kind of contractor state of mind, which is, I didn't know how to do marketing. I didn't know how to do sales. I didn't know how to price or bid or value myself. I just did what I thought was right. And luckily for me, some mixture of talent, luck, and timing and all that stuff worked out in my favor. And I was working in the motion design space, making commercials and music videos. And I thought that this was my calling in life because I got to do everything. I got to combine typography, design and animation, videography and editing all together. And I thought, this is it. This is what I want to do forever. But towards the end of my professional service design career, I had grown my design studio at one point to a bi-coastal office with the one in New York, one here in Los Angeles. I thought this was it. But all of a sudden we started to see patterns get interrupted. Things started to change. Consumption was changing. Young people were no longer tied to cable or satellite. They were downloading or streaming content to them. And so I could see the writing on the wall as clear as day, that the era and the age of commercials and marketing in an interruptive pattern was going to change. I didn't know what the answer was going to be. I just knew this was not the future for us. And then that's when in 2014, I ran into an old friend of mine from Art Center. His name is Jose Caballé. And he made videos on YouTube. And he's like, let's go make videos together. And I was thinking at that point in time, I don't want to do this. I'm a loudmouth. When I say what I think, and I mean what I say, and likely this is going to get me into a lot of trouble with clients, because as soon as somebody asks me, hey, what was your worst client experience, I'm likely to tell you. I don't have that filter. So I was really scared. I was like, I don't want to do this. And I'm a very quiet, introverted person. I've had a long history of just like, I don't want to talk to people. I'd rather just stay in my office, stare at my computer, and do my work. I don't really want to talk to people, and I want to limit that to as few as possible. But Jose did something that's very generous, and I have to share this with people, because he said, you know what, Chris, here's the deal. I need you to be on camera with me, not behind camera. I need you to be in front of camera, and don't say anything. Just sit there, smile if you want. Don't say something until you're comfortable. I'll carry the show. And it's kind of hard to say no to that. Literally, he will do everything. The intro, he'll do all the talking points. And I just sat there. Every once in a while, he'd throw a question at me, and he's like, no, not ready. You just keep going. And if people are so morbidly curious, they can go back and watch that episode, and they'll see how tight and stiff I was. And they can probably feel my pain. Just looking at my eyes and my face, you could feel the pain. And I gotta tell you, it's not imagined pain, because the very next day, I woke up, and for days, my jaw was aching. I couldn't figure out why. It was because I was so tense. It created pain in my jaw, right? But I gotta tell you, my business coach used to tell me this. He says, Chris, there's two types of people: those that run towards change and those that run away from change. So that moment, kind of summoning up my courage to say, you know what, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna go outside my comfort zone. I'm gonna step out in front of the camera. I'm gonna do this thing. It literally changed the course of my life. At that point, I wasn't sure there was a business here, but I knew there was something here.
Wow, that is so relatable. Hey, Sean, like this is so very similar to our interaction that Sean and I had. Sean being the individual who said, Carl, let's do a podcast together. This was 2 years ago. And I was like, yeah, sure. But deep down, I was like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to talk on camera. No one's gonna want to hear what I have to say. And then Sean hit me up again last year, and lo and behold, we took that step. So I can totally relate to that journey. Sean naturally, he's natural on camera anyway. And for me, it felt like I was rigid, even though I facilitate quite a bit. So I can totally relate to what you're saying.
Yeah, my clenching my teeth is curling my toes when I'm nervous. I'm
like Die Hard, like Bruce Willis Die Hard.
Yeah, so my face might look straight, but I definitely can relate to where you're coming from, Chris. So let's unpack that further. So I'm inspired by your success and the companies that you've grown, and I'm wondering, how do you personally measure success, and what are some of the indications for you, be it with Blind and now the Futur, to know that the companies were trending positively or developing in the right way?
Okay, they're going to be two very different answers, because Blind is a service design company. We work for clients, mostly advertising agencies, sometimes artists themselves, like musicians. And you measure success quite simply, like client satisfaction and delight. Do they like the work? Are they happy? Are they thrilled? Do they tell other people about it? Which would lead to the second way to measure success, which is referrals. Oh, I heard from XYZ, you do amazing work. That's wonderful. And you know, something that is a long-term thing that you develop is sometimes I wouldn't talk to a client for 10 plus years. And when they call you out of the blue 10 years later, Chris, are you still doing this? And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing this. And I can't believe that without personal interaction and networking, that they would even remember who I was, because that's a testament, I think, to the relationship you built a long, long time ago, that they still remember you, that they'll still refer you. Other ways of measuring success that are more extrinsic versus intrinsic are probably awards, press, those kinds of things. Like, do people in your industry, your peers, recognize the work as being good? And so at the beginning of our career, we chased a lot of that stuff. We'd submit it to competitions and we would win. And it was like, oh, this is not as hard as we think it is. And you would just apply. And the very highest accolade I ever received was to win an Emmy. And there's a little story behind the Emmy, which is I thought I never qualified. We work in commercials, not in television. But my office manager, she's like, you know what, Chris, I'm going to get you an Emmy. I'm like, you're going to get me an Emmy? Like, how's that going to work? So she went through the entire instruction booklet to figure out what category we could submit under that would qualify, you'd give me the best shot of winning. So there's a whole art to entering competitions. If you don't enter the right category, if you don't write the right description, you just automatically become disqualified. And so she actually did get me that Emmy because I didn't even try. She submitted it, and then we won it for a music video I directed called The Heart of Stone. And it was just a beautiful experience. It's the first time like I'm around like the fancy people, you know, the good looking people. I'm like, okay, good looking people in the front, I'll be in the back. It's cool. I get
it. A follow-up to that, was there a change in momentum or after you won the Emmy? Like, what was there any noticeable differences in, you know, in how companies, other people recognized you and your business? What was it like before and after that moment?
I'd like to tell you that my whole life changed. Like, it went 180 degrees, that the phone was ringing off the hook. And I got to tell you, maybe 2 or 3 people called me, and that was it. And that was the entire difference there. And I think when you're talking to regular folk who don't work in the design industry, you have to tell them something they can recognize and hear. And they're like, yeah, I've heard of that before. If I told you all the other awards we won, you'd be like, what? If you're not an industry person, you wouldn't know. So the Emmy becomes a shorthand for a lot of different things. You know, it's one below, I think, an Academy Award. An Academy Award's like, oh, everybody's heard of the Academy Award, but I'm not an actor or producer, so that's not going to happen for me. But yeah, it's easy to say, and then people like sit up straight, you know, because I can list the 36 different awards we've won, but the one that people almost always select is Emmy. So I'm not fighting it. I've embraced it, and that's the name brand that people recognize, and then we use that. But I forgot to answer the second part of your question, which was, how do you measure success when it comes to the Futur? And the Futur is our education company, and their success is measured very differently. It's not about now client satisfaction, delight. And I want to use Jason Silva's definition, like, as to be a billionaire in the 21st century, I want to be a billionaire. He says it's not measured by the amount of money in your bank account. It's measured by the amount of lives you've positively impacted and touched. And that's the mission that we're on. We want to teach 1 billion people how to make a living doing what they love. And the way that we measure that, there's a couple different ways. There's a very scientific way, because we have a little counter on our website, and people voluntarily say, count me, I want to be counted. And you get assigned a number. And once that number is given, nobody else can have that number. And so slowly but surely, every day, it's like 1 or 2 new people. We're up to 20,000 something. So we're moving, not as quickly as I'd like, but we're moving. And the other way we measure success is when people DM me on Instagram, on Twitter, or on LinkedIn, or wherever else they DM people, and they say, here's what's happened to me. Here's how you've helped me. Here's how I went from thinking about quitting this industry to like having a thriving business. And I'll sum it up in this story here. I was in Geneva, in Switzerland for a design conference, and this young man reached out to me. He's like 20 something, early 20s. And he says, I need to meet you. I need to give you something. I said, okay. All right. So I meet him outside, and there he is. He comes over. He's like, you see right there? I live right behind there. I'm like, okay, cool. He said, last year I was living with my parents. I made $20,000. I watched your videos. I applied what you talked about. These are the free videos that we make on YouTube. He says, this year I made $100,000. So this is just a token of my appreciation. So he hands me a bag of chocolates. I'm thinking like it's a couple of bars of Swiss chocolates. It's like bricks of chocolate. And I'm like, wow, thank you very much. And he says, how can I thank you? I said, you already have. You already have. By being successful, you've thanked me.
Yeah.
Outstanding. And how do people find you? Like, I guess they have to be at a moment of self-reflection to a degree and then they encounter, be it your site or your YouTube, your videos on YouTube.
Yeah, we try to make it really easy for you to find us because we're pretty good at the SEO game. You know, we know how to title our videos, things that people are searching for. We know how to add the metadata. We know how to write articles that people are going to read and get high traffic. Because we know our people, we know our tribe, the people that we serve. And so all you have to do is begin with a question. And if you follow your curiosity, you know how to ask the internet a question, it will most likely lead you to us. If you're in the design space and you're looking for business help, you're going to find us. Now, when you find us, you're going to find a really sometimes aggravating bald Asian guy telling you things that are counterintuitive to the things that you want to believe to be true. And they're very challenging. And then I become this very polarizing person because I say things very emphatically. I don't mince words. You know, I'm very straight and direct when I say things to camera. And on first blush, you might think, I don't know about this guy. And it depends on which video that you watch. You know, a lot of people say this when they watch our videos, especially now as our audience is getting bigger and bigger. The first question is like, who's this pompous a-hole? He doesn't know anything. None of this ever works. This is totally stupid. This is a con and some kind of weird snake oil stuff. He probably has never done anything in his life. That's usually what they say. And they get a lot nastier than that. But after a couple of viewings, and I just love to like see the same person start to comment and you see the tone and the tenor of their what they're saying slightly soften. And eventually what happens, I think if you watch enough of our videos, you're going to say, I was wrong about you. And some of them are brave enough to actually find me and tell me how they were like, I was not prepared to like you. A lot of things that you say I don't agree with, but then I realize what you're doing here and I appreciate you. And that's good enough for me.
Wow. Chris, is that by design? Like, so shifting from your previous like if we use the two metrics discussion we just had, shifting from your previous life to now, are you leaning on the same techniques? Like it's got to be more than just I have more energy and I have more people, and this is how I'm able to interact and engage people on YouTube, on Clubhouse, on LinkedIn. I mean, you personally sent a message to my son and gave him advice, and he's just 18 trying to get into coding, and you don't do coding. So what is it? Like, what are you leaning on to even, or methodology that you're using to be able to get to this billion mark? Like, what is it? What's the secret sauce, if there is one?
That's a really good question, Carl. I have to think about that for a little bit because when I like to think, okay, there's something you don't know about me, which is both my parents are very different. Like my dad's side of the family, they're all engineers and scientists, and they're in the technical industry in Silicon Valley. Everyone on my mom's side of the family is like super creative. They're poets, writers, artists, and musicians, all that kind of stuff. That's who they are. They're poor. They're struggling through life, but they're super, super happy. My dad's side of the family, they were quite successful. They're all upper middle class, living the American dream. And I am somewhere in between these two people. For a long time, I knew I was a creative person, but I suppressed a lot of that because I was like, I see the pattern with my mom's family and I see the pattern with my dad's family. And I'm like, I don't want to be poor. I want things. I'm a materialistic person as a young person, you know. I want all the things that success, the spoils of being successful. And so I had programmed myself to rewire myself to think about doing analytical things. I took an aptitude test in high school. It told me I'm supposed to be a stockbroker, an accountant, or something like that in the financial services industry. I was like, I'm set. The only problem was I was too lazy and unfocused, so I didn't excel in school. I barely tried, and I got A's and B's all the time, and I just wasn't plugged in. So I think somewhere in me is somewhat half Vulcan and half Captain Kirk, and I can't quite figure it out, right? So I'm very logical and analytical. So when I'm working with clients, the thing that I'm always asking myself is, how do we win your business? And I will experiment. I'm not afraid to try things that may not work in pursuit of the thing that might work. And every time I lose, I put one in the do not do that again this is now the path or the instruction on how to win. And so as you can imagine, the first couple of years, we lost job after job. And when I'm talking about job, even as a 22, 23-year-old kid graduating from school, the size of the jobs were hundreds of thousands of dollars. So every time I'm sitting here looking at my student debt and I lost another $160,000 job, I'm like, God, what is wrong with me? What am I supposed to be doing here? And I'll talk more about that later, right? So I start to understand. I call people, I research, and I'm like, let me try this thing, let me try that thing. And I get better at it, and I start to win work. And nothing like breeds success like success itself. Because when you're successful, other people say, wow, you've done that job with that other client. That was amazing. We want to hire you. So the more successful you become, the less you have to try. So you get caught up in that. And that's really good, for your own self-confidence. Or wow, I'm starting to win work. I'm starting to bid against the companies that I once looked up to. This is where your idols become your rivals, right? And it is a good feeling. And I'm super analytical. When it comes to creating content for a totally different segment, the end user, where the transaction is free, because most of our videos are for free. We've recorded over 1,300 videos on YouTube. Now I have to understand a different game, and the game is search and the algorithm of YouTube. What do we need to do for a thumbnail, for a title, for people to be able to find this video in the sea of, I don't know how many, a billion videos? How can people find you? It's like a needle in a haystack. And so you ask questions and you meet people and they teach you and you try things. So that same kind of scientific method of trying a variable and seeing against a control, see what works, see what doesn't work. And ultimately, you learn how to be on camera, and you learn how to say things that people connect with. And I've studied countless hours of other people that I thought, well, the way they do X is really good. I wonder what they're doing, and I'm going to try it next time.
It's fantastic. You said you're going to loop back to another point you had.
Yeah, I forgot what I was talking about. Yeah. What was I talking about?
Listen, Chris, I want to absorb everything as much as I can. So if you say you have another tidbit, we're going to tease that out. Maybe we'll go back to that.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was though. I wanted to tell you something. Yeah.
Maybe this will jog your memory. In terms of that, especially early in the career, being a student or trying to lock in deals, what was your initial feeling when you're not closing these deals? Was it a moment of setback, or were you immediately inspired to try something new? What was that what was that feeling in your mind, and was there a transition in thinking with a lot of?
Okay, here's how I'd like to describe it to people who I'm trying to find an analogy here. Imagine if you were playing like Monopoly. Everybody knows to play Monopoly, right? Imagine like you didn't know how the game works, that you're supposed to roll dice and you go clockwise on the board. Imagine if you're facing the wrong direction and you're like, throw dice, and you throw the dice out the window. I felt like that's what I was doing, because I had not worked for anybody for any period of time to be able to witness how new businesses won. Through the miracle of God or something like that, we got new business calls when I don't know anything about doing sales at all. So we're put in front of people who are, I remember one of the earliest jobs that we were looking at was for Chiat Day, Apple's agency, okay, Chiat Day, that little agency, and they had this account, Nissan, and they called me and they're like, okay, and I'm talking to them. I have no idea even what to say, what questions to ask. And then at that point, I'm like, we've ruined this. I'm on a conference call with the executive creative director from Chiat Day, the producers, executive producers, art directors, senior art directors, and it's just me on the phone in my home studio in downtown Los Angeles. And so I knew, like, we lost that job. So we submit the bid, and guess what? Surprise, surprise, we don't get the job. And so you feel like, I didn't even know the rules of the game. I've already lost before I even got on that phone. And I was desperate. I felt dejected. I knew I could do good work. I just didn't know what they were looking for. Now, I'm still pretty early on in my motion design career, because I had studied at that point to become a print designer. So I'm overcoming many obstacles. One is I'm entering into a field that I'm going to teach myself what it is to do. I'm learning the language of business and commerce. I'm learning how to pitch. I'm learning how to budget. So there are too many variables. There's this stock photography where there's like a dog and he's like on a bicycle and he's like balancing like dishes on sticks, and there's a goldfish in one of the dishes. It's
Yep.
that I felt like that. I felt like overwhelmed and defeated before I even started. Like, here we go. Here's another job I'm not going to get. And it was brutal. And it will eat away. I knew I was good design wise, but I knew I was terrible from a new business point of view.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, personally, like my own business is roughly 4 years in at the moment, and the first couple of years felt exactly like that. You know, I've been transforming companies for years, digitally transforming them, but hearing rejection, initially it feels like there's something wrong with me personally, and you know, so altering my thinking to enable better sales, so to speak, and to bring my value to the problems that organizations are facing, really help. And one success begets another. So I can really relate to what you're talking about.
Yeah. So I now remember, Carl, what the heck I wanted to tell you. The thing I'm going to circle back to. It just needed a little time. The thing I wanted to share with everybody was that frustration that I felt, not knowing how to bid, not knowing how to even have the conversation about new business, led me down many different paths, from calling friends who were directors, trying to get any kind of advice. They gave me a lot of bad advice. And one of them told me, you know, Chris, they're like buying your confidence, so you need to just tell them what's up. I'm like, that is not what you do, is it? Right? And so ultimately, I think 4 or 5 years into my business, I meet my business coach. And I meet him because I'm having lunch with a friend at an Italian pasta place here in Santa Monica called Futur. And he's talking to me about like how great his business is going, how it's doubled. And when I hear the word doubled, like, doubled? Really? How did this happen? He's like, oh, I'm working with a business coach. And I didn't even know what a business coach is. I'm like, you mind sharing his phone number with me? And he paused for half a second, and thank God he's like, and his name is Hugh. And he's like, Hugh handed me a phone number. I'm like, this is fantastic. I went home, I called the business coach, and ultimately wound up working with this coach for 13 years.
Wow.
And yeah, and the business coach I met with once a week for an hour to 2 hours every single week without fail. And this is where I start to learn about business and entrepreneurship and sales and customer service and marketing and everything. I learned it from my business coach. His name's Kier. And in learning this, I'm able to then take my business from something that was doing about $2.2 million a year to 3.9 to ultimately at one point almost $7 million in billings a year. Not in profit, okay? I'm not putting $7 million in my pocket, just $7 million in billings. And then I start to realize something. I had transformed. And I remember because my cousin worked with me at that time, and he'd been working with me for a number of years. He's like, man, Kier is just really rubbing off on you. You can see your confidence, the way that you speak, the way you run meetings is totally different. And this is a person I grew up with, and he'd been working with me for a number of years. So I'm like, I guess something is happening. So young people started to ask me, so I'm going to start a business, Chris. What should I do? Or this company wants to hire me, and it's not like I think they're taking advantage of me. So I start offering them advice. And then I realized something, and this is one of those cognitive biases, the curse of knowledge, is when you become good at something, you forget there was a point in time in your life when you didn't know how to do it. And so when these young people ask me questions about business and how to negotiate and do sales, I tell them things like, hey, dummy, don't you know this? But I was thinking, oh, fudge, I don't know this, or I didn't know this. And it's only because I spent 13 years working with someone that actually know these things. And that's the foundation of what it is that we teach and our channel called The Futur.
Right. So I've been following The Futur for, I told you, about almost 1.5 years now. And the transformation, I love how you use the word transformation. The transformation for me was certainly the tactics in negotiation and connecting with other businesses. But there is a shift in my thinking where I had this list of clients I want to work with or people that I want to interact with. And it's slowly coming true. Sean being one of them, right? Me correcting with Sean has really leveled and brought up my platform. Me connecting with you, Chris, through this as well as through your channel. Is it too, so I've gained that. I'm now working with clients that are on my list. Like I got one of my first clients that's been on my list, and thank you for helping me get there. You too, Sean, for helping me get there. But I'm getting lessons learned as we go. Like a lot of continuous improvement, a lot of transformation, but lessons learned. I'm putting on my digital transformation hat. This is the language I'm using, Chris. Is it too soon for you to share some of your lessons learned with our audience? Is there maybe 3 to 5 things that you've gained in transitioning to the future and getting to that 1 billion mark?
Sure, I'd be happy to share. I want to say one thing to everyone who's listening. It's like, wow, okay, so Carl's life is transformed. Other people's, like, when am I going to get my share of the transformation? Here's the thing. I want to say this so that everybody listens and understands what I'm saying here. Is your clients are a reflection of who you are. Your clients today are a reflection of who you are, the values you put out into the world, the quality of the work that you do, and how much personal development you've done. So when you're slumming it on those digital marketplaces like Fiverr and Upwork and those things, and you're trying to make a living thinking, why can't I make more than $200 doing this? What's wrong with the world? Well, there are lots of things wrong with the world, but the fact that you're not attracting better clients has nothing to do with that problem. The thing is, you haven't learned how to market yourself. You haven't made it easy to find yourself. It's one of the things I talked about before, which is we make it very easy for people to find us. If you start poking around the internet, you start typing in keywords we want to be found for, you're going to see us oftentimes in the number 1 spot in Google Organic, or number 1, number 3, number 5, and number 8. And because we work at this, it doesn't take that much. It does take some knowledge and some effort. So what happens is creative people shift back into this mindset. And unfortunately, it's one that's perpetuated by your instructors, your professors at school, that the quality of the work will speak for itself. And that's a lot of BS. Let me just tell you that right now. You could be the world's best, fill in the blank, marketer, the world's best designer, identity designer, brander. But if you put your work inside a room in a vault and you lock it away in Fort Knox, I don't care how good you are. It's not that the world is waiting to throw you up on their shoulders and usher your name across all spectrum, like all media. They're not waiting to do that because people have their own lives. And they're not sitting there worrying about your future. You have to make effort. You need to be persistent and consistent in putting your work out there. Okay, so I hope everybody can hear that, right? So the quality of the clients that you get reflect the quality of thinking, writing, and content that you create in the world, period. So then the next question comes up, which is, what should I put out into the world, Chris? Okay, and you're going to do something that, again, is counterintuitive. I'm sure I'm going to make some enemies today, but that's fine. I don't care. So what you think is the secret sauce is I'm just going to shove my work down everyone's throat. So you take your same portfolio that's been locked away in your site that has poor SEO, and you go on social media, you're going to open up an account, and then you're going to start repeating that work over and over and over again. And then you're still sitting there. The world's not beating down a path to my door. What is the problem? The problem is in a world of like great design and a glut of choices, like we have an embarrassment of riches in terms of like you go on the internet on any kind of design thread, you're going to see some of the world's best work because you're not competing against your classmates or the city or the state or the country that you live in. You compete against everyone in the world that has done what you're doing, living and dead. Think about that. People are still searching out the work of Paul Wren and Saul Bass. They're still searching out the work of Maholi Naj. And that's who you're competing against. So the competition for eyeballs is incredible. And so you're sitting there now, you're pouting. It's like, okay, so I have 600 followers on Instagram. When I post, it's like, a tree falls in a forest. It doesn't make a sound if no one's there to hear it. And so you get really frustrated. So here's the thing. If you want to reach more people, you need to teach more people. This is critical. So now it's just not about your work. It's about how you came up with ideas or how you solved a specific problem. As soon as you do that, you give people a reason to care and a reason to share. Otherwise, it's just another glossy thing in a sea of glossiness and it gets lost. And so you have to adopt a different mindset. You have to teach people about the process of how you come up with ideas, about your thinking. Now you're going to run into problem number 3. I don't know what it is I'm thinking, Chris. I don't write. I got into design and the visual arts because I don't want to write. And that is going to be another sin you've committed. Because if you think about it, right now, wherever you're listening to this or watching this video, How is it that you know what I think? You know it because I have these electrical impulses in my brain that transmit themselves to words that we all have shared definitions of. We understand, so I'm decoding thought into words that get recorded into energy, and the energy is transmitted through the internet and then repurposed as energy into sound into your ear hole, and then you have an idea. That's how one person transmits thinking to another person, is through words, through written words, through spoken word. But you have to learn how to write. I don't mean like write like you're going to be Shakespeare. I don't mean for write like you're David Ogilvy. But you need to be able to decode your thinking, and you need to put it down onto digital pixel or whatever, or ink somewhere, so someone can read your thoughts. Now they know who you are. And maybe you've done a good job of telling your story and teaching people what it is that you're doing and how you're doing it. In that way, other people are going to connect to the message, and it's going to resonate, and then they're going to possibly save it. Better yet, they're going to share it. You know, if somebody were standing down at the street corner and they're yelling out free gold, because they want to share this rich information to better your life. So you want to create a piece of content where people feel so compelled that they're going to stand at the street corner and say, check this out. Watch this video. Listen to this podcast. And in fact, you have to ask yourself, how did you find out about this podcast you're listening to today? Most likely, someone told you via the internet, the social media platforms, check this episode out. Otherwise, you would not be here. And that's your job. And that's the puzzle you need to figure out.
Gosh. Oh my gosh. That's like, Sean, you go ahead. That's
I'm
amazing,
just going,
Chris.
yeah, man. I'm just going through like a major mind shift right now. I love what you're saying about if you want to reach more people, you have to teach more people. It makes so much sense. You can have all the talent in the world, but if people don't have access to it, don't see it, or you're not saying it in the right way that they can find it, that makes total sense. Wow, I'm having a major mind shift here right now. I have some offline reflection to do based on that. So, geez, what are you feeling, Carl?
Just the same. I for a second, I forgot we're on our podcast, and I thought I'm listening to you on YouTube or Clubhouse right now. Like literally, I was just, I wonder if I can text him and ask him a question. I forgot we're engaging in a podcast.
It's interactive.
I forgot it's interactive, and yet I have nothing to add to it or to question, because that was really amazing 3 points. Thank you so much, Chris. Sean, I know we're running out of time, Chris, and I would love to do this again, or next time you come to Toronto in the summertime, right? We'll have time to talk about this in warmer weather.
I'm good with cold weather too. I'm always looking for an excuse to break out my layered look, you know? Here in California, it's like layered look. I got a t-shirt and some flip-flops on. That's it.
We'll get you a nice toque to go with our bald heads, man. Right on. So I was gonna ask, in closing, like how can people follow you? Just if you can help us break down through your YouTube channel, Clubhouse, how can people reach out and continue to follow you in your journey?
Sure. You can find me pretty much on every social media platform, with the exception of TikTok. My team manages that for me, but I'm not active on TikTok. But everywhere else, you can find me at the Chris Doe, and Doe is spelled D-O. It's pronounced, or it sounds like cookie dough, but it's just spelled D-O. And we have a channel on YouTube called The Futur. So if you type in The Futur, and The Futur is spelled without an E, so it's Futur, F-U-T-U-R. And there's a funny story behind that. Like somebody on the internet, on Twitter, said, Chris, why did you misspell the future? Where'd the E go? Where did the E go? And I'm like, you know what? We dropped it. We dropped the ego. That's why we spelled the future without an E. So there you go.
Very clever. Do you want to talk about your class? I was recently connected with someone who's in your class, and they said, whoa, this is a ride. You gotta, Carl, if you're jumping on, be ready, because it's an intense class, and expect to learn, but also expect to produce. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, sure. There's multiple ways that you can engage with us beyond the free social networks. Like I'm on Clubhouse, sometimes multiple times a week, multiple times a day, and on some days like today. But if you want to enroll one of our courses, it goes a long way to supporting what it is that we do in our billion-person mission here, and it's just how we make money and how we pay the team. But there's also a coaching community that we run called the Futur Pro Group, and that's $150 a month. And we do 2 coaching calls, not different than this. I'm here in my home studio. We do calls. It's interactive, and there's I think a library of over 200 videos that are exclusive to the group. And as much as I'd like to think people come for me and they come for the archive videos, they don't. They actually they come, but then they stay because they make a lifelong friend on this creative journey together called entrepreneurship. And it's really neat to see people from diverse communities and backgrounds connect, and the unlikeliest friendships form. And then people actually create businesses together, and they hire each other and they support each other. And that's really why they're like, you know what, there is no other community like this on the internet. And that's called the Futur Pro Group.
Right on, right on. I'm definitely seeing the half Vulcan, half Captain Kirk here. You're both a mad scientist and just a creative visionary as well. Yeah, literally. So thank you. There you have it, folks. Thank you again, Chris, for joining us today. Packed with information. Thank you, Carl. As always, it's been a peach as always, brother.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, man. And to everyone out there, I just want to remind you to stay cool, everybody. And remember, you can live your life as is, or you can chase a dream of where you want your future to be. Peace.